She stood behind the rope every Sunday at noon. Same spot, same grey coat, same soft wave, barely more than a lift of the fingers. The royal guard never responded, never flinched, just stared straight ahead, locked in tradition. But she kept coming, week after week, until one Sunday, she didn't. And what the guard did next left the whole square silent. She never gave her name, never said a word. She never crossed the rope, never made a scene. But every Sunday, without fail, she was there. Same time, same spot, just watching, just smiling. A quiet presence in a noisy world, and then she stopped coming. No warning, no goodbye. What happened next didn't involve shouting or spectacle. It was the guard, stone still, rule-bound, who broke protocol in a way no one expected. Before we reveal what happened, hit subscribe and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes the loudest stories come from the quietest people. Corporal James Calder had been with the Queen's Guard for 8 years. His posture was textbook, his silence absolute. Rain, heat, jeers from tourists, none of it touched him. Among his regiment, he was known not for stories or camaraderie, but for precision. For the kind of stillness that made people think he'd been carved in place. Off-post, he barely spoke unless spoken to. Not out of rudeness, out of discipline, out of habit. The only thing he ever carried with him, beyond regulation, was a single pressed letter. Folded perfectly, tucked behind the inner flap of his coat. His sister had written it just weeks before she passed, before Calder enlisted. He never showed it to anyone, never read it again, but he carried it every day, like weight and comfort rolled into one. And though no one would ever hear him say it aloud, he noticed everything. Especially the woman who stood at the same spot every Sunday, not loud, not seeking attention, just there. Like a detail in formation he couldn't explain but always expected. Once a recruit asked why he never seemed to bend the rules, not even slightly. Calder didn't blink. Some people break rules, he said. Others hold them in place. I was raised to hold. She never missed a Sunday. Rain or shine, cold or heat, she was there, just before noon. Always in the same spot, slightly to the left of the center gate, always wearing the same soft grey coat, never holding a phone, never shouting for attention. While the crowd surged around her, tourists posing, children laughing, people calling out to the guards, she stood quietly. Still, present. Sometimes she gave a small wave, more gesture than action. Most weeks she simply smiled, software gentle, like she knew the man behind the uniform, even if she'd never met him. Some people noticed her, most didn't. But Corporal Calder did, every single week. He didn't look, didn't acknowledge. But he always saw her. The coat, the way she clasped her hands in front of her, the way she never left early. It became part of the rhythm, like the changing of the hour or the sound of the bell on the quarter mark. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew her presence, and over time it began to matter. Then one Sunday, as the clock struck 12, she wasn't there. At first he thought maybe she was late. A train delay, a longer walk, the crowd shifted as always, unaware. Cameras flashed, a child shouted, but something felt off. Her spot, empty, like a note missing from a familiar song. He said nothing, moved not a muscle, but inside that perfect posture, something had shifted. Calder held formation, same posture, same silence, same rifle at his shoulder. But something was wrong, no grey coat, no soft wave, just the usual crowd, loud, distracted, unaware that something was missing. He didn't move, didn't scan. But every second she wasn't there weighed heavier than his uniform. Still, protocol was protocol. No reaction, no questions. The next Sunday came, same shift, same weather, still no sign of her, not in the corner, not in the crowd, not anywhere. He told himself it meant nothing, that people travel, that things happen. But it wasn't logic he was standing with anymore. It was absence. By the third Sunday, the pattern had changed, and not just for Calder. That week, a young boy, no older than 8, stood by the rope in the very spot the woman used to occupy. He wasn't pointing or laughing like the other children. He was holding something, a folded piece of paper in both hands, pressed against his chest like it meant more than he understood. He looked up at the guard nearest to him, not Calder, and said, "My mum said to give this to the soldier who never moved." The guard, unsure, took it carefully, then passed it back through the rotation chain. Wordless, respectful. By the time it reached Calder, the crowd had shifted again. Noise returned, but in his gloved hands now sat a folded piece of paper. Neat, light, and for the first time in years, Corporal Calder felt something unfamiliar behind the stillness, something called dread. The paper stayed folded until the end of Calder's shift. He didn't read it on post. He wouldn't. He couldn't. When the hour changed and his rotation ended, he stepped back into the barracks, removed his gloves with precision, and placed the note on the bench beside his folded cap. He sat for a moment, still in uniform. Then, slowly, he opened the letter. It was handwritten. Blue ink. Steady, careful strokes. The kind of writing people don't rush. No header, no formal greeting, just a quiet voice on the page. "My name is Anna. I'm writing on behalf of my mother, Margaret." The words were plain, but Calder felt them immediately. "She came to see you every Sunday. After my father died, she said she needed something that didn't change. You reminded her of him, the way he stood, the way he never complained. He was military too." The paragraphs were short, thoughtful, honest. "She never wanted to talk to you. That wasn't the point. She just wanted to stand near someone who stood the same way." And then the final line, the reason it had been passed along. "She passed last week, quietly. Her request was simple: tell the guard thank you for helping me grieve in silence. No address, no return envelope, just the letter, just the message." Calder folded the paper back along its original creases, pressed it between his palms for a moment, then placed it inside his coat, right behind the one he carried from his sister. Some people shout to be heard, others leave paper and trust the silence will carry the rest. The next Sunday came. Noon. Same post, same uniform, same rigid line drawn between tradition and chaos. The weather hadn't changed, overcast with a soft breeze pushing sound through the square. The tourists were out in full. Phones up, voices too loud, everything was exactly as it always was. Except for one thing, just beyond the rope, in the very spot where she used to stand, rested a single white flower. No tag, no vase. Just laid carefully on the stone, its petals slightly stirring in the wind. No one had seen who placed it. Maybe it was the daughter. Maybe someone else had remembered. Or maybe, somehow, the world had simply left space for it. Calder took his place on post, as always, silent, tall, immovable. But as the hour turned and his boots found their mark, something happened. His eyes, just for a moment, shifted downward, the smallest tilt, barely noticeable, toward the flower, then back, fixed once more on the horizon. The crowd noticed. One woman lowered her phone, a man took off his hat. No one said a word. They didn't need to. Some gestures don't break silence, they complete it. Corporal Calder still stands post, same gait, same posture. Still silent, still stone, but now, some days, a small smile flickers through the stillness. Not often, just for a breath, but enough. Enough to know he remembers. Enough to say he sees what others miss. Because some people never speak to you, never wave, never ask for anything. And still, they find a way to be heard. Have you ever been comforted by someone who never even said a word? Would you notice if they disappeared? Hit subscribe for more stories that speak in silence, and share this with someone who's ever held space for someone else's healing.